you just introduce yourself?
Great.
Please?
Hi, I'm Ken Riegel. I'm the executive director here at Just Harvest. We are a community-based anti-hunger and anti-poverty advocacy organization that works to address the root causes of hunger and poverty here in Pittsburgh.
What got you interested in going into the field of social work?
Oh, that's a very good question. I actually kind of didn't know it was social work when I went into it. I had studied economics at college and was passionately committed to progressive political change, to working in an environment, and I wasn't too concerned which, that would enable me to have some impact on working towards a more just and fair society, particularly on economic issues facing poor people. And coming out of college, without ever having heard that there was such an occupation as community organizing, I answered a classified ad in a left-wing magazine and got hired as an organizer with a small community organization here in Pittsburgh about 30 years ago. And have been working in the nonprofit community sector ever since. I had worked on, excuse me, on a number of different issues over the course of time, was active as a volunteer in many other organizations. But worked for Acorn a long time ago. It was kind of how I got my start and learned a lot of the skills of doing community organizing. Worked for a senior citizens organization, worked on community crime prevention issues in Homewood Brushton for a couple of years, and through kind of the personal networking that you find in a town as small as Pittsburgh, through a couple of friends had heard about a part-time job opening at the Hunger Action Coalition, which was the organization that back in the mid-'80s eventually transformed some of its programs into Just Harvest, and I've been with Just Harvest now ever since, helping to found the organization 26 years ago.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. What do you enjoy the most about your job?
I think there are two things. One is that I'm able to do what I set out to do in my career. I'm able to actually, not so much personally, but as part of this organization, have a real impact on not just making a marginal difference in people's day-to-day lives, but in making real changes that underlie the circumstances that allow people to go hungry in this community, and being able to work towards broader political change that makes public policy in this community more just, more fair to poor people, more compassionate, that treats poor people with more dignity than it would otherwise, is incredibly rewarding. The second element of that is more on a personal level, and the nature of this work is that every day is a different challenge. I don't, and I think it's truer of me as the director than it is of other staff people here, but I think everybody who works here has an experience of today is not the same as yesterday, and tomorrow won't be the same as today. There are different challenges, there are different issues that emerge, there are a million things to do, and all of them require sort of different sets of skills and knowledge and insight, and I've often likened the work of community organizing to juggling, and that the skill is in keeping all the balls moving and keeping them all in the air, but at the same time, the way to do that is to not concentrate all your attention on any one of those balls, but on sort of what they're all doing all at the same time. And that that skill, I think, it's exciting to be challenged in a work environment where that skill comes into play all the time.
You might have kind of answered the next following questions already, but I'm going to ask them anyway. What can be your the most challenging part of your job? Like, what's something that, yeah, the most challenging part? You know how there's
Yeah.
always something that's just
Seems unattainable.
yeah.
Well, there's a few possible answers, and there's a
Okay.
lot of the job that's just really hard. One big challenge is being able to prioritize. Right, there's too much to do, and not enough time to do it, and so you have to make sensible, tactical choices about what's most important to get accomplished. And sometimes that's a very frustrating process of sort of hopping from deadline to deadline,
Right.
instead of being able to step back and think strategically and focus on the things that are most important for us to make progress on. So that prioritizing process is sometimes sort of distorted by what has to happen in the short run, instead of really choosing more carefully what needs to be done to strengthen our mission in the long run. The second big challenge is that the path of least resistance in the fight against hunger is collecting a bunch of food and giving it to people. And as worthy and important as that work is, that's not what we do here. And the pressure in sort of the public understanding of the issue, the pressure of that way of thinking that says collecting a bunch of food and handing it out to poor people is the way to fight hunger, we have a constant challenge to change hearts and minds about the nature of the problem, to help people understand that hunger is a function of poverty, it's a side effect of broad economic injustice, and that the solutions to hunger don't lie in handing out cans of beans to hungry people. They lie in a strong and compassionate public safety net for people who can't fend for themselves in the economy. And more than that, in the long term, it rests on an economy that really works for everybody, that has decent jobs at decent wages, where people can feed their families on their own. We're a long, long way from that, and the progress in that direction is very slow and often very frustrating, especially when there's not even a consensus in society that that's our goal together, that's where we want to get to. So persuading people that yes, that ought to be the goal, an economically just society with good jobs at good wages for everybody and a compassionate, strong safety net for people who can't work or who are between jobs or who face all kinds of barriers to the help that they need. Knowing how much of a challenge our mission is, given those circumstances, is the giant challenge.
Okay. What do you do on a daily basis? I know you might have kind of answered that because you said it could vary.
Yeah, it varies every day. So yesterday is kind of an interesting example. I spent some of the day working on our upcoming Empty Bowls fundraising event. One of our biggest fundraisers of the year is happening in a couple of weeks. It's a joint event with the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank. So there's all kinds of work publicizing the event, selling tickets. Most of what we do here for the event is organize the making and donating of about 1,500 ceramic bowls from students and potters and community arts centers all over the city and county. So talking with bowl makers, making sure that the bowls that are coming in are getting inventoried and readied for the event. I had a meeting yesterday with the person who's working on the committee that helps organize the silent auction at that event. So we were sort of figuring out what the values and opening bids and descriptions would be of bowls that are being auctioned off. So I had that meeting. I had a meeting with a coalition of several other human services organizations that are working together on a strategy to apply together in some way for the federal funding that will be becoming available soon to help enroll people who don't have health insurance in the new insurance exchange system. And no one really knows quite yet what the guidelines for those proposals will be. But we know that we need to organize sort of a broad statewide or regional coalition that will apply for those funds and figure out a good strategy for bringing uninsured people into the insurance system. So strategizing with some of my colleagues about how to do that wisely, and what organization should take the lead in that effort, and talking about sort of who some of the other players in the political sphere and in the health insurance sphere, in the healthcare field, in social services, how everybody can play a role in that effort. Then I got back to the office, had those two meetings, had a conference call with another of our coalition colleagues who's working on a project with us to expand and improve local farmers markets to make them better and more accessible for poor people in particular. So we were talking about plans for bringing on a graduate student intern to help with that project, and we needed to talk about kind of the human services side of recruiting that intern. I had a bunch of phone conversations and emails with our board members about a couple of upcoming board committee meetings, and had a meeting with two of my staff colleagues about problems that we've been having in collecting accurate data about our clients, particularly people who are having some problems dealing with welfare department about their food stamp benefits. And we're trying to communicate to the welfare department about what those kinds of problems that we're seeing are, and being able to do that with good, rigorous data is one of the challenges that we face. So I was doing all that yesterday, and coping with the fact that a few of our staff people were out sick or out at conferences or out of the office for a variety of reasons, and so we were shorthanded, and that means that when the phone rings I answer it too. So,
Okay.
so there's a lot going on.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions we have.